Dynamics of the financial circuit. Our earlier presentation on SFEcon's material circuit established a weakly self-reinforcing mathematical subsystem. Any such system governed by ordinary production functions will feed upon itself. This is because production is always increasing as asset uses increases, even while rates of production's increase are always decreasing at the margin. As more assets are produced, still more assets can be produced. Thus, more in the way of economic theory is required to explain why material goods should not be expected to proliferate without limit. We begin to lay out SFEcon's financial circuit by simplifying the economic matrix to express only transactions for a single economy isolated from foreign trade. And we continue with our temporary presupposition that prices are simply known. Our financial circuit's purpose is to manage monetary flows originating as assets' physical rates of asset replenishment, R sub ij, interact with prices, P sub j, to generate the sector's net cash flows, minus rho sub I. Please recall that, per SFEcon's sign convention, an industrial sector's profits, rho sub I, are expressed as a negative, cost of sales minus revenues. Household sectors are designated by substituting L, denoting labor-leisure, for the subscript I. Rho sub L is generally positive, consumption minus wages, indicating an expectation that consumption will exceed wages and that the shortfall will be supplied by passive income. The obverse can also be in evidence, with wages exceeding consumption so as to service a net indebtedness. For those who are by now thinking that SFEcon's sign conventions are a needlessly formal annoyance, please consider that an even more daunting alternative would be to speak in terms of debits and credits, together with their respective effects on assets and liabilities. An industrial sector's capital, kappa sub I, is the amount of money that sector I has spent, including costs of capital, but not yet earned. By convention, kappa sub I is positive. As shown, financial obligations are relieved by profits. A negative rate of flow, rho sub I, operates to diminish a positive monetary quantity, kappa sub I. A positive rate of flow would propel material in the direction given by the arrow on the path that it controls. The cost of capital, epsilon sub I, is also a negative rate of monetary flow. It too reverses the path it controls, and thus operates to increase sector I's financial obligations by augmenting the positive monetary quantity, kappa sub I. Model 0 entails very little with which to animate familiar notions as to what constitutes an interest rate. We therefore content ourselves with an interest rate computed by the industrial sector's collective internal rates of return. The variable iota expresses an economy's interest rate in the negative sense. As shown, epsilon sub I is given by multiplying iota times an industrial sector I's current financial obligations, kappa sub I. Iota is by convention negative, so as to convey the positive feedback inherent in financial operations. Unserviced financial obligations will grow exponentially at the rate of interest, and the same is true of unredeemed savings positions. Positive feedback is an inherently ornery thing to manage in formal dynamic systems. Thus, we emphasize that economic modeling entails a challenge to demonstrate how the weakly positive feedback animating the material circuit might control and be controlled by the strongly positive feedback animating the financial circuit. Model 0's financial intermediary is all but transparent. The interest rate minus iota that he computes could not be more simple or obvious. He consumes nothing, and therefore requires no spread between the rate of return that he pays on savings positions and the rate he charges on invested funds. His portfolio entails the assets of all the industrial sectors. His function is to continuously gather up all the dividends minus epsilon sub I generated by industry, and to distribute them as passive income among the household sectors in proportion to their current savings. The contra accounts he maintains are merely negative sums on the industrial and household sectors' financial state variables. And the most interesting thing he does is to calculate the investment term for placements of household savings. Passive income, epsilon sub L, a positive quantity, is shown here at the upper right, decrementing a household sector L's savings level, gamma sub L. By convention, household savings are negative quanta, and are thus made more negative by passive income. Households' net cash flows, rho sub L, operate at the upper left of this diagram, diminishing savings through actions of its positive component consumption, and increasing savings through the action of its negative component, wages. As shown, savings are envisioned as a loop. Control over savings is surrendered for the duration of the investment term T years, the time required for $1 of principal to get around the loop. When $1 of principal has completed this circuit, it is returned to its owner after having earned passive income throughout the investment term. Examining the savings loop's internal structure, we see three internal state variables linked so as to create a circular path of monetary flow. Deposits and withdrawals are injected into this stream at the state labeled A. Thereafter, funds move automatically under control of the investment term T. With the interest rate minus iota computed by the industrial sector's collective internal rates of return, completion of the financial circuit requires only computation of the investment term T. These calculations are best envisioned as being carried out in terms of our implicit financial intermediaries' contra accounts, kappa and gamma. The unsubscripted kappa is a negative sum on the industrial sector's capital accounts, kappa sub I, and the unsubscripted gamma is a negative sum on the household sector's savings accounts, gamma sub L. Note that SFEcon's sign convention has now gotten around to create more intuitive variables for use in the intermediary's calculation of the investment term T. Capital obligations kappa are negative quanta, and investment positions gamma are positive quanta. Total dividends, iota kappa, to be distributed as passive income, being the product of two negatives, are positive quanta. Flows of invested funds through the intermediary's contra-rotating savings loop, gamma divided by the investment term T, are also positive quanta. As shown here in the top equation, these rates of flow can be arranged to express the notion of net present value, NPV, in terms of the system's current financial state. The numerator is the current flow of funds, gamma over T, committed for investment. The denominator has gamma over T augmented with the returns iota kappa flowing in return for those investments. The equation below simplifies the equation above such that each financial state variable appears only once. It will be noted that SFEcon's financial state variables can also be arranged in the more familiar transcendental expression of net present value, shown here above the algebraic expression just developed. Transcendental mathematics and algebra are of course two mutually alien ways of looking at one and the same world. As can be seen, these estranged points of view can be made to serve our purpose when we solve them simultaneously to eliminate net present value, NPV, and reveal the investment term T. Unfortunately, the solution here cannot be trivial, and our emulators must rely on the Newton-Raphson technique to continuously recalculate the intermediary's investment term T. Solving these equations separately for the investment term T will illuminate the hazards of instability in capitalist economies through calculable quanta. Here we can see that the investment term T approaches infinity as the investment rate minus iota approaches zero. But net present value, NPV, must also be driven to unity as the interest rate vanishes, and this would force the investment term to zero, even while it is also being forced to infinity. So SFEcon portrays financial instability through an investment term that is trying to be both zero and infinity at the same time, and thus begins resonating between these extremes. As such a circumstance comes closer and closer to actuality, its only realization would have the savings loop suddenly evacuated so that the nothing remaining might move at infinite speed. Thus the periodic singularities observed since the inception of financial capitalism can be portrayed as a singularity forced upon calculations for an investment term.